you know, there are wildly popular categories. And I know he's looking at the winners tonight to say, what perfect physique can I put on top of those trophies for my future winners?
Yeah, classic physique is a little bit different than the Sandow Trophy. I mean, the Sandow Trophy doesn't look like necessarily the ideal physique, but these classic bodybuilders, they are artists. They are a throwback to back when Frank Zane, we skipped him. He won Olympia back in 77.
I mentioned him, but out of order.
And they'll tear us up on Instagram if we don't get that one in there. Frank Zane won it 3 times, 77, 78, 79. I think that's who they had in mind. They wanted to go back to that era and try to find that physique and bring back that classic quality.
Those beautiful lines, those V-tapers, those tiny waist, the vacuums, the poses, they want that beautiful classic posing.
Right.
They don't want that pump up the crowd, most muscular. They want to see the classic lines, like we mentioned last night, of the late great Ed Corney, Frank Zane, that era of the late 60s, mid to late 60s, all the way up into that mid 70s.
Absolutely, and those are some of the things that were getting lost. Immediately after my retirement in 2001, we started seeing some very lackluster performances. And we also started seeing bodybuilders that were coming in way too heavy, thinking that that's what they needed to do to stand up there with the big boys to win. So we're now putting the genie back in the bottle, streamlining some of these guys, and it's wildly popular. I said about 5 years ago that in 5 years, if these guys aren't careful, classic physique will be the event that we actually come here to see, and the bodybuilders may go the way of the 8-track if they're not careful.
Well, and another big portion of every show, every NPC, every local show, nationals, is men's physique.
Yes.
And the turnout was huge from around the world, and those physiques were top-notch. I got to say, I know you've noticed this, the guys are getting a little bigger, and they wanted to step away from that. They're not supposed to be bodybuilders. But I also noticed from first call-out to last call-out, there was a tiny difference.
Yeah.
And that's got to be tough to bring your absolute best and end up in those last couple call-outs doing the best you could.
Yeah, and again, that's one of the divisions that's wildly popular because it's more inclusive. You don't have to bulk up to 300 pounds and diet down to 250 to be relevant. And you also don't have to be 18 years old. You can be 40-something. I mean, there's a wide range because you're only hitting maybe 2 poses, 3. Front, side, and back shot, and that's a wrap. But you better have those dialed abs. You better show the deltoids. You need to show the conditioning and the quality of the skin. And also, they want you to look like the trophy that you were talking about. Literally, you got to be like from head to toe, the tan, the hair, the suit, the confidence. And when you see it, you know it. And that's why that's a competition that title's changed hands a few times.
Well, and you saw prejudge this morning, if you were here, you saw some beautiful V-tapers, Brandon Hendrickson, Raymond. Ryan Terry from the UK brought some conditioning that was absolutely stunning, and his V-taper and his back spread was just beautiful. His lats flared out up into some beautiful rear delts. It was a great morning of prejudge.
Yeah, and because this is a relatively new division, the names don't resonate the way that the bodybuilders do that have been there for years and we've become accustomed to seeing them. Some of these guys get their pro card and bam, they're in the Olympia that same year just because of their natural structure. And you don't have to invest so much in your body to get to that development for the physique. So we're going to see some new faces, and we're going to find out whether or not these guys can hang on to the title.
Well, speaking of a new face, last night Kamal Algarni did a wonderful job winning the men's 212. I saw him out on the floor today taking pictures with everybody, and he was happy to be out there giving back to the fans, and boy, his family back home was proud.
Yes, and we're going to come back right after this commercial break with one of the trainers that knows a thing or two about all these athletes competing here tonight.
are back to bodybuilding's biggest night. 2019 Joe Weider's Mr. Olympia. We have a new face with us now, Sean Ray, Hall of Famer, and joining us just between, mega trainer and one of the gurus to the sport, Neil Hill. Neil, welcome to the broadcast tonight.
Hey, thanks, guys. And girls, I'm sure you're going to be really excited to see what's taking place in today's performances. There's a lot of anticipation taking place from the pre-judging, obviously, yesterday, and the pre-judging which took place in the expo hall this morning with the different divisions. I think that you're going to see something pretty spectacular within the class division. I was there watching all the pre-judging, and I was very impressed with what I would say the top 6.
Absolutely. Let's define the accent first. We're not from California. Neil, you're from Wales, now living in Florida, correct?
Yeah, so I'm currently in Boca Raton.
Okay.
I'm from Wales, in a small seaside Tenby resort. Living here now for 2.5 years, and I'm really enjoying being here amongst obviously all the athletes, and being here in the hub of America gives me the ability to expand my reach.
Now, for those that may not know, you were the trainer to Flex Lewis for how many of those wins?
Well, pretty much all of them. I've been working with Flex for 16 years. So I started out actually working with Flex on September the 12th, 2003, so 16 years ago.
And how old was he when you started?
He was a baby. He was out of diapers.
Yeah, he was 19. Yes, 19.
Well, your impressions from this morning. You're going to be joining us today for the Classic Physique and the Men's Open. What are your impressions? We'll start with Classic Physique and who stood out, and then we'll start up with the Open.
To be honest with you, I would say all of the top 6 really impressed me. The level of conditioning throughout all those athletes was really superior. And the great thing about it is classic bodybuilding to me is a blend of Lila Brada, Frank Zane, Mohamed Makawe, Francis Benfato. And you could see there was some form of resemblance within that top 6.
Well, let's talk about, because some of those guys you just named were not big in stature, but they had perfect shapes and symmetry. We'll talk about like a Chen Kang or a Keone. Talk about Chen for us. I believe he's the first Chinese bodybuilder to ever make it to this level.
He was super impressive. Probably impressed me, not necessarily more than anyone else. It's just the fact that this is the first time I've seen him with my own eyes in the flesh. So when you see images, you see obviously internet videos, pictures, but then you see it in the flesh. Sometimes it doesn't live up to your expectation. This guy's shape, structure, muscle bellies, you question how did this guy carry so much muscle, especially throughout his lower half, and make that weight division, but still have the ability to maintain a certain level of thickness in his upper body to go with that lower half. He was a very impressive athlete, guys.
Not to mention he was pulling in that vacuum, very reminiscent of a Robbie Robinson and a Frank Zane. You don't see that very often. And you don't expect the Chinese to be so well developed. It's kind of a new market over there. I spent a couple of years over there, the last 2 years going back and forth, and they are really starting to gain ground in terms of their development. Also, the gym equipment is very good. The nutrition, I am amazed that he looks the way he does, eating the food that they eat over there.
But he came in really conditioned. Another one that came in condition. Let's talk about year over year, Chris Bumstead, who I know is hungry to win this after so many seconds, just chomping at the bit.
Joe, this is a really tough one because obviously I'm very honest and very particular when I see my views and I'm looking at the athletes. I thought Chris looked really great, but he was still weak from the rear. His back was not hard enough. It didn't have the fullness. His arms are still obviously a little bit undershowered with his lower half. I do feel this is possibly a better showing with his shape and structure or condition this year as opposed to last year. Do I think it's enough from where I saw? Personally not, but I feel that he brought a great package to the stage. And also you've got to take into consideration, this gentleman obviously has some, not necessarily health issues, but he has a disease which really hinders his ability to put maybe 100% everything to prep that a lot of athletes are doing day in, day out.
Not to mention he's like almost 6 foot tall, isn't he?
He's 6'1".
Yeah, so there's a whole other element.
Now, Classic Physique, if you may not know, they give you a height and a weight requirement. You have to be a certain height and under that weight.
Right.
But the taller you get, the more weight you can have, but the more weight you have to compete with those full package bodybuilders in the 5'4" to 5'9" range.
And you have to train within the confines of those regulations. As a bodybuilder, we go in there, we train, get as big as we can get, strong as we can get. There's no restrictions. So that makes this a very interesting division because that's always in the back of your mind, how big you get in the off season, how long am I going to allow myself to come down, and who am I going to stand next to? 6'1" against a Breon Ansley at 5'6". It's a real different dichotomy there.
Now, one more Classic Physique that I did mention, Keone. Keone was massive at that size. He was very that classic X body, and Tony Freeman is what came to mind.
Yes.
So What were your impressions of him and his conditioning?
I thought Keon brought probably what I would say is lifetime best condition. Do you know, it's funny because he kind of reminds me of Sean to a certain extent, because he fits into that class division perfectly, but he's got mass like a real bodybuilder, yeah?
Correct,
like a real bodybuilder's mass. He brought a great blend, and he's got this phenomenal structure from hamstring, glute tie-in, etc. You know, his hamstrings are popping, his glutes were tight, got a crazy vacuum.
And he's young. He's really young for this division.
A lot of these guys are very young, like Chris Bumstead, which is good for the sport to know that they will define what this looks like going forward.
Absolutely. In terms of the competitiveness, the classic physique, I think, has more depth than anything, unless you're talking about the bikini, because the bikini is just a matter of taste sometimes. I know it's a physique contest, but at the end of the day, classic physique, you really got to split some hairs in order to separate and distance yourself. And right now, I think Breon Ansley, based on what I saw, he may be a three-peat.
Well, and that was something I noticed again in the classic physique. You saw some guys that I've seen emceeing contests across the upper Midwest for Tom and Kathy Kemper. You see guys like Panix Pierre, who came in here conditioned, looking great, and ended up in third call-out. You think that's the quality at this level at the Olympia when there's, what, 36 athletes?
Right, and they're global. They're from all over the world. They're coming out very strong over in the Middle East as well.
Well, let's touch on bikini real quick, because there were some interesting call-outs. If you're a bikini fan, and so probably half of you might be, there was some interesting call-outs and some interesting shifting around. Were you there for that, Neil?
I wasn't there, guys. No.
Okay, I will tell you then. There were some champions. I'm not going to give it away because there's still confirmation round, there's still live judging, but there were some people that weren't standing on that center square for prejudge, and they moved some people back and forth, which is going to leave this spot wide open.
Yeah,
you don't want to miss the finals of bikini.
It's going to be, it was a very subjective prejudging, but I think it's better that if the judges did know, they didn't leave that to the audience to go away with. You got to be here, or you got to be watching live tonight in order to find out exactly how that wraps up. Because Ashley Kaltwasser, she's got 3 of those bikini championships. The reigning champion, Angelica, has 2, so she's trying to tie her. And of course, Janet Leung. Oh my goodness.
Janet Leung, and then Elisa. Elisa and Jennifer Runziti.
Yes,
both looked amazing this morning. I don't know with the Italian and the Brazilian if it's Bikini or Piscini. We'll get it right. We'll get it right by the time the show rolls around. But they both looked amazing, and there was a solid top 5.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of new to judging the bikini, so I'm like, I like the one in the red, the one in the green, the one in the blue. I mean, they're coming from all over the world again, and that's why this was such a welcome addition for the federation. Some of the bodybuilding girls and some of the fitness girls didn't really warm up to it, but the numbers and depth speak volumes to the interest that these ladies have in bikini.
And from the bikini competitors I know, you train hard, you diet hard, you're athletes.
Yes.
So, you mentioned bodybuilding a minute ago, and you and I talked off air about the men's open. You're the experts. Let's talk some men's open.
I was there all night talking with you, so let's find out what Neil was witnessing.
So, to be honest with you, obviously exciting going into this year. The door was wide open. There was probably realistically 4 people battling for that first place, maybe 5. But I was disappointed with the level of conditioning most of those athletes brought to stage.
I felt redundant saying that.
And it's hard for me to say that because I personally know most of these guys. You know, you can put 110% in. Sometimes you just miss your peak. So, of course, it's obviously frustrating. But
in saying that, Neil, do you think we got spoiled with the condition of the bodybuilders in the 90s? I mean, there's a slew of those 90s bodybuilders that are in the Hall of Fame that we're not going to see on this stage here tonight. Yet the playing field is equally leveled for all of these guys in terms of the competition. I think we find ourselves judging their condition now based on what it used to look like. It seems that way anyway. That's what I hear a lot of.
I feel back in your era, Sean, conditioning, you know, obviously you had to bring a certain level of condition or you're never going to be in that top 10. You're certainly not going to be in the top 6. And if you have to be constructively honest, if we look at past Mr. Olympias, not every athlete in that top 6 is always 100% or even very close to it. You know, for me personally, I felt that Hadi was the most conditioned athlete, which what I would say in the top 6. I would say after that was William. I don't think this was the best package that Williams brought to stage.
When you say that, though, it's like you're only as good as what you're standing next to, right? I don't think any of them are in the best of what they've been in.
No, and I agree. And then obviously you go to Rowley. I feel Rowley really took a couple steps back on himself. So and Brandon's got such a great shape and structure. Yes, he does lack in the lower half, especially through his thighs and hamstrings and glutes. From the side, from the upper body, he is phenomenal. He is Mr. Olympia.
One of the best side chests.
Unbelievable. But he still didn't bring that level of condition and that what I feel Mr. Olympia is about.
This is what I was alluding to Tim last night. I'm like, it seemed like it felt redundant. He's a little off. He's carrying a little bit of water. But then we go to Mr. Saturday Night. Phil Heath was very dominant in changing and transforming from Friday to Saturday, pulling the water. All of these guys are capable of potentially trying out and pulling that water because they get in that criticism and the instantaneous feedback we get now on Instagram or looking at video, they can do things that we couldn't do back in the 90s. Do you think there's going to be some people that are going to be able to make those changes that are going to be dramatic?
Overnight, pull that
like
water
Derek Rushford did.
To be honest with you, it is obviously possible, but I think it depends on how much they know their bodies or how much their coaches know their bodies. So this is really when the science really takes place and where the homework takes place. There's not all Mr. Olympias, when it's been run over 2 days, have come in 100% on the money every day. They may be being close, and then on the second day they'll be able to obviously peaked. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously the guys have got the ability to redeem themselves. Places can definitely shift dramatically. Which way the judge is obviously going to go from last night's performance. Today we'll obviously wait and see what points are carried on from yesterday to tonight. And obviously we're always going to be watching, obviously critiquing and giving our opinions.
Well, we talked about the top four. We've covered them.
Yep.
Just outside the top four, we saw some interesting call-outs in that second round for Dexter Jackson and Steve Kuglo. And then we saw kind of a wild card that may have a future. A lot of people I was talking to in the lobby today liked Michael Lockett.
Yeah, Michael Lockett. Moore was also very good. There's a couple of those guys may wind up coming up. Steve Kukro wanted that first call-out. His wishes came true last night. Let's see if he can hang on to that. There's a few guys from the back that may wind up coming up tonight.
That was an interesting shift around. There was a kind of a third or fourth call-out after the call-outs that brought out that next level to see where's everybody going to really shake out in that 6 through 10 range. That got really interesting. And again, like you guys have said, depends on what they do with their conditioning, whether they can even move up a little bit more.
Well, let it not be lost in all of the excitement here tonight. It is the largest prize money in the history of Mr. Olympia's 55-year existence. The women all significantly walked away with a lot more money, trying to level that equality thing out. And they're all very deserving because without the women, we lose half our audience. They are doing amazing things, and our sponsors, Wings of Strength, Trifecta, Muscle Farm, iHerb, they are the ones making all of this possible for the athletes.
Well, we thank you for joining us in Digital Muscle. We've got a great broadcast ahead with all the sports. We've got men's physique, as well as the Eagles champion, world champion. That's going to be very interesting. The expo was amazing this weekend. What a turnout we've had all weekend. This show just keeps getting better and better.
I'm not sure if you caught it, but we did have the Wings of Strength legends and champions. Neil, we had Miss Olympia Carla Dunlap from 1983, Kike Ayoma.